Guys, it's Oli from Rat Season. I'm excited to be joined today by international best-selling travel writer and author Robin Esrock. Robin, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, whereabouts are you at the moment, Robin?
I'm in my office in Vancouver, Canada, and like most people, haven't been out for what feels like forever.
Yes. How's the situation? When did sort of lockdown begin, and kind of what's been happening?
We've been very fortunate here in British Columbia. Out of all the regions with more than 5 million people in North America, Western Europe, we're at the bottom in terms of infections and fatalities. So we've been very, very fortunate. We are only at about 10 infections a day. We're in stage 3 of lockdown, so that basically means everything's open and everything's opening up. Even at the height of lockdown, we weren't as bad as other places. We just nipped it really well here. Culturally, our province did really well. The leadership did really well. People have been following the rules. And so we were very fortunate. We're very fortunate, and we're very outdoorsy, right? So that really made a huge difference. We don't have a big public transit system, and we're outdoors, and it was spring, so it's all played in our favor. So of all the places to be in the world right now, Vancouver is definitely one of the places you don't mind being in.
Nice. I'd love to, I guess, take it back to, how you got into traveling, and when did this all begin for you when you thought, okay, this could be a career?
My story is I was hit by a car on my way to work one morning in a desk job that I wasn't very inspired by. And I received a $20,000 insurance settlement for a broken kneecap, which I called the luckiest break of my life. I took the money and I went backpacking for a year. And there was an actual moment where the light went on, because I didn't quite understand what travel media was about, what travel writing was about. It was my idea to capture as much of this year as I could in a what we'd call a blog now, although in 2005 blogs weren't a big thing. They were just starting to come out. But I could build websites, so I decided to capture as much as I could. And there was a huge amount of discipline that was involved in that. Sitting down one day a week, writing thousands of words, doing my favorite photos of the week, interviewing every person I met. And it was all for me. It wasn't to create some sort of profile. It wasn't to build a brand. And just before I left, I did pitch a newspaper the idea of a column. It was the first time I've ever kind of done something like that, and they loved the idea. And so I became a columnist for the Vancouver Sun, or like the main newspaper here in Vancouver. And there was a moment in Brazil where the lights went on, and that was in Rio de Janeiro. And it was a part of the beach where hang gliders go off. It's called Pedro Lopez, I think it's called. It's a mountain that goes over the beach, and hang gliders love it. They come from all over the world to go hang gliding over this beach. And you can go for a hang glide with these guys. They tandem pilot instructors, put you in a cocoon next to them, and off you run off, and they do everything, and you land on the beach. And I thought, wow, bucket list, right? But I couldn't afford it. My budget was $35 a day for 12 months. So that included food and accommodation and activities. And I started speaking to one of the guys, and he said it's $200. And I was like, nah, I know when people are traveling, there's always this temptation of, when am I going to get the chance to do this again? But when you're traveling for a year, and I think that was the 3rd month, if I said I'm just going to spend the money, I would be home in 4 months.
Blow your budget.
Yeah. So I got talking to the guy, and I said, I can't afford it. But anyway, but we started chatting over a coconut, and I told him that I write a column for a newspaper back in Canada. And he said, well, if you write about this, I'll take you up. And I thought, well, if you take me up, of course I'm going to write about this. This is like the most exciting thing that's going to be, like, this is something this is the most exciting thing of the week by miles. And that's when the light went on in terms of how I could use travel writing as a tool to tick off everything I ever want to do in a kind of tit for tat, everybody wins scenario, because I'm super enthusiastic and I want to write about it and I want to inspire other people to do it. I can't afford to do it myself, but these guys will invite me to come along. And using that kind of model is how I managed to move forward.
Amazing. And was that then, did that sort of hit the spark for you to say, okay, like doing these experiences, doing these bucket list things, so to speak, was then the goal moving forward when you were traveling to different places?
Yeah, so everywhere I went, I would look to try and do the one thing that you should do there. Bucket list as a phenomenon hadn't really emerged yet. That only came around in 2007 with the movie. And that's the strange thing about bucket lists, is everybody thinks they've been around forever. But in 2007, the movie comes out with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman, and it introduces this corny catchphrase to a very powerful idea that everybody resonates with, that you want to see and experience certain things before you die. I never really applied that prism in the beginning because I didn't even know it existed. It just so happened that it dovetailed perfectly with what I was doing, which was effectively chasing my bucket list. Going to all the places and doing all the things I've always wanted to do, whether it was skydiving or seeing the Taj Mahal. It was just, I wanted to have these unique experiences. And then when bucket list came about, it really kind of aligned nicely with the kind of stories that I've been chasing.
And how did you, like, when you got to these places, did you do any research when you were looking to travel there, or like how did you find that thing to do? Was it just something that everyone was talking about when you got there?
So when I was backpacking, I did no research. For that year around the world, it was all word of mouth. I didn't travel with any guidebooks. I had 3 basic rules for that trip around the world. No guidebooks, never turn down a free drink, and never turn down food if somebody's offering it to you from their heart, something like that. And so that was just kind of all by accident. Where it really picked up was with my TV show, Word Travels. And that was a lottery ticket of being sat down by a producer and told to just choose where you want to go and what do you want to do. And that was in 2007, 2008, 2009. And you start looking around the world going, what is there something unique to do? And even then I wasn't thinking bucket list, but I was thinking, what can I do in this place that nobody's seen before and that you can't do anywhere else? And that's really how I've come to define what a bucket list experience is. It's something unique. It's something that everybody can actually do. It's something you'll talk about for the rest of your life, and it makes a great story. So if you tick off these 4 very subjective boxes, to me, you've got yourself a bucket list experience. And so as you traveled around the world for Word Travels, everywhere we went, Bolivia, okay, biking down the world's most dangerous road. Yeah, absolutely, ticks off all those boxes. What did I do in Latvia? Can't even remember what I did in Latvia. There was building watching. Slovenia, riding a Lipizzaner horse. I don't ride horses, but I was like, this is these incredible horses that only come from this part of the world, and this is where so everything was just really about focusing on that experience.
And I mean, like you've been over to over 100 countries, doing all these different trips throughout the years. I mean, you probably get asked, if there's one sort of standout experience, one bucket list thing that you've done. I mean, is there anything that you can sort of pin it down to as like, okay, this has been the craziest thing you've ever done, or is it just, it depends on which country you're in, and you've got a handful of experience?
Yeah, I think everyone will ask me about favorite countries, and I always say it depends on what you're into. Yeah, their favorite countries for food, their favorite countries for nature, for views. Say, for views, I would say Iceland. For food, I would say Malaysia or Thailand. For animals, South Africa, Kenya, things like that. I think it all depends on your interest. If there's one place in the world, there's probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 countries I can recommend easily and say, if you go, you will have the most incredible time. Antarctica is out of this world. Is something that I think just defies imagination, and the adventure itself of getting there, the whole experience of Antarctica is to me probably my number one, just in terms of it's not like nothing else I'd seen. I think places like Turkey and South Africa are very unique countries with a lot of culture and landscape and history, and there's just a lot to see and do in those countries that you can't do anywhere else. Bolivia is a country I often recommend to people. It's off the radar, but if you go to Lake Titicaca or the Salar de Uyuni, you'll see and do things there that you just can't do anywhere else. And that to me is ultimately what makes such a great travel experience, is when you come back and you say, it was out of this world. It was like going to another planet. If it's something that you feel you've seen and done before, it tends to slip away in your memories. But the same with hotels. If you can stay in a treehouse hotel or an ice hotel or castle hotel, like these are places you don't forget because they're just so unusual and so unique. So I think that's what everybody should be or is chasing.
Yeah. So and then like once you did the TV show, you go from there. When you looked into doing your first book, and
so
which is Canada, is that right?
Yeah, the Great Canadian Bucket List actually came about from a column in a newspaper here in Canada. So the TV show was about me being a travel writer, myself and my co-host, looking for stories. So as I was researching the stories, when we kind of wrapped, I had a column in a national newspaper where those stories would go. Mm-hmm. And on Canada Day, sort of like Australia Day, I was asked by the editor to put some sort of Canadian story together, and all my travels were international. So I came up with this idea and I called it the Great Canadian Bucket List. And looking back, I don't know why I did call it the bucket list. It was just, bucket list was already starting to enter popular culture. I traveled all over the world, and I never traveled Canada, where I live. So I came up with an idea of all these places or these experiences that I'd really love to do. And a publisher approached me about a week after the column ran and said, would you like to write a guidebook? And I said, there's no way I'm going to write a guidebook this was 2013. No, where to eat, where to sleep, where to get a pizza is not my jam at all. But I counter proposed the idea of actually going and doing these things and writing them first person as a travel writer. Figuring someone must have done that before though, and nobody had. So I spent 3 years traveling across Canada, ticking off these unique experiences, writing about that, and that book was a smash success. It really came about at a time when Canadians who tend to look to Australia and the US and Europe for inspiration just started to rediscover their own country. And I think now, with COVID, even more so, that people are looking around going, what can I do around here? We've got a fantastic wine region here in British Columbia. Why would you go to Tuscany when you can ride through the Okanagan in British Columbia? So these kind of things are really starting to bubble up. And that book has been around since 2013, and it's a 20 times national bestseller. Did really well. And that led then to the global bucket list, which is about my international experiences, and then to the Great Australian Bucket List, in which I had the opportunity to do everything you could do in Australia.
And how long were you traveling around when you did the other books? And when you did the global one, was that sort of almost like memoirs from everything that you've done?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. There were some gaping holes in my bucket list for the global book. So Antarctica, in 1 year, it's a good year. I did the Galapagos, the Amazon, Antarctica, and the high Arctic in 1 year. and that was for the global book. They were just to kind of tick off. I was like, I can't not have the Galapagos and the great global bucket list. So it was a combination of 10 years of travel as well as all these kind of new experiences. When by the time I got to Australia, I'd kind of honed it really into a bit of an art of not only distinguishing the experience and identifying it, being able to communicate it and experience it. And I was able to do Australia, not everything I wanted to do, but most of the things I wanted to do in just 6 months.
Wow. It's just a massive place, so that you must have been on the move quite a lot. We drove 20,000 kilometers. We took a dozen flights, and I had my wife and 2 young kids with me, which led to another book, which led to that book, 75 Must-See Places to Take the Kids Before They Don't Want to Go, because that was a whole different adventure and journey, which I don't know, we still have a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder from trying to do as much as we could do with children. It was nuts. It was crazy. It's different, huh? With my wife last year, we did 4 months with a 2-year-old around Europe. So we did 25 festivals in 4 months. The 3 of us bring along, and it's like, I don't know, you kind of look at the beginning going, yeah, this is going to be sweet. And things certain change. And now looking back and knowing that, what's happened this year is it was the best thing that we've done.
Yeah.
How long did you travel with your kids when you did that book?
It was an 11-month trip. So we did 6 months in Australia, and then we went and we lived for 6 weeks in Chiang Mai in Thailand, in Bali, and in Hoi An, Vietnam. So we kind of, there's no point to come back. My daughter hadn't started school yet, so we just kept kind of going. But instead of moving around in Australia, we stayed in over 50 hotels. So we were just moving so much, and of course with kids, it just doesn't work that well. Travel's a callous. You got to, you might be like ready to go, pack bag, unbag, but with kids, they kind of like stability. They like routine. So once we got to Asia, we could just stay in one place, and it was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. And again, like you say, in light of what's going on, it's amazing to have been able to do that and look back on that and say, we were able to travel as a family, to live in different countries, because I think it's going to be very different moving forward. It's going to be a lot more difficult, or there's going to be a lot more barriers and a lot more friction. So, the idea of just being able to jump on a plane. I mean, we went to Singapore for 4 days, jump on a plane, let's go. I think those days are kind of done.
Yeah. And how do you see everything changing? I mean, what's your thought on, I guess, this new normal that, everyone's kind of talking about?
Yeah, the last year, just before COVID, I got fascinated with over-tourism and sustainable tourism. And you could see it really hit me in Bali, where we arrived in Bali and there was just so much garbage in the ocean, and the roads were choked with traffic, and it just really hit me about this exponential growth of tourism and travel, and what the kind of so much money in it, but also the toll it was taking, not only on the environment, but on culture, on how we travel. I thought that the meaningful connections were being lost in just a desperate rush to get hold of that mighty tourist dollar. And I've seen it before. I mean, there's some places that are obviously more pronounced, that you feel like you're walking around as a very privileged tourist, but it's very difficult to have a connection with local culture when you're just, that connection is, you really have to work for it. And certainly in the beginning of my career, I didn't have to work for it that hard, but as things kind of progressed, I found myself working for it more and more. So I wrote a story about over-tourism, and this was at the time when that as a buzzword was really picking up steam. Dubrovnik, because of Game of Thrones, was overrun, all these cruise ships. And I actually did a keynote in New Zealand about it. There was this wonderful picture of, this iconic picture of you in New Zealand in the mountains, and someone turned the camera around and there was a lineup of like 100 people waiting to take that one picture. So, along comes COVID, and that conversation of over-tourism is being completely, it's almost laughable. I think any tourism business now would say, give me over-tourism issues, because it's better than no tourism issues.
Yeah.
So in a sense, what we're seeing, I think, is a reset for tourism. And in some senses, it's going to be better, because I think we are going to come back at it more sustainable, with a bit more responsibility towards the environment and culture. And yet at the same time, it's that looseness of just being able to get on a plane, being able to explore without feeling like you're a threat, both culturally and now physically with health. It's going to take some time for that to recover. I'm optimistic in general, but I think that it's going to take some time. And when we get back to that point, it will always be a bit different. The same way, the way my analogy is, it's like going to a restaurant and you get food poisoning. It's unfortunate, and that could be a fantastically great reviews on TripAdvisor, and you go to this restaurant and you get food poisoning. You're not going to go back to that restaurant in a hurry, if at all, even if it was just a one-off, really unfortunate event. And maybe you'll go back sheepishly, and maybe you ate a say, what was it? Maybe you ate a arrabbiata pasta that gave it to you, or more likely, with pink chicken. Yeah. The next time you go, you see that pasta, you're not going to order it, but eventually you might put it in your mouth and it's really good. Okay, let me take some more, and it will take a while before you're like, okay, I can go to that restaurant, I can eat that dish again.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think you're right. It's going to be, people are going to be a little bit obviously cautious and bit by bit, So what's what are you looking at now? Like, what goals, or I guess obviously this year's sort of travel plans looking forward? I mean, are you sort of focusing on any new projects, or what have you been working on?
Yeah, so going back to 2005, I was at a festival called Szeged in Hungary. I don't know if you came across that one. It was like the island is called Szeged in Budapest. It's this big music festival.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember wandering around. It was like middle of the night, and it was really cool. Like, all these festivals in Europe are just so amazing. And I entered this tent, and it was like a tea tent, something I can't remember. And I started talking to this girl, as one does. And I was like, yeah, my name's Robin. I'm traveling around the world. I'm doing all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, what have you done? And I told her, well, I went hang gliding here, and I went to this river rafting there, and I did all this stuff. And she said to me, that's all great. What have you learned?
Yeah.
And that question has always haunted me, about what I've learned through all these travels. It was something that kind of drove the idea behind my Tedx talk, Travel to Learn. What did I learn from all these experiences? And it's something that I wanted to capture in writing as well. So in 2019, I took a year off to write a novel. I believe in the power of story to kind of get a greater truth across. And I thought, if I could tell what I've learned through a story that people want to read, that's fun, that captures all these great travel stories, especially the ones I couldn't write for newspapers or previous books, like Change the Names, Protect Innocent Parties. And so I wrote a novel which I finished basically earlier this year. And so, travel is at its core theme. and I hope to get it published. Right now, I don't know if the world is aligned with the idea of a international jet-setting travel novel about a beautiful young woman chasing the ghost of a dead father in 6 continents. I don't know if the world is ready for that. I don't know if it belongs in fiction or in historical fantasy, because certainly it's from a different time. But I'm very proud of it. I love the story, and I hope it gets out there and onto the shelves one day.
Any advice from what you've learned, and obviously meeting all these people all over the world, someone that's kind of looking to go away, if it's either for their first trip or go away for a long time, backpacking, whatever it may be, what would be your piece of advice?
Pack less, for one thing, because you're going to overpack. Well, first of all, I think right now, given the climate, stay safe. I was getting a lot of press releases from, especially in the States, like Arizona and California, like, we're open for business. Mexico, we're open for business. And I thought that was a very premature and somewhat irresponsible to, open your, I understand there are a lot of businesses, there's a lot of people, there's millions of people on the line, livelihoods, including my own, with getting tourism back on the agenda. But at the same time, we weren't ready for it. And it really was irresponsible to kind of start promoting tourism before we're ready for it globally. Yeah. So the first thing is wait for it to be safe, for it to be really, really safe. And then you'll probably find not only great deals, but a really enthusiastic response to be going out there. People be so grateful to see you as a tourist. And this is our chance to, travel again with more responsibility, to go into each adventure with an open heart and an open mind, drop the entitlement. That's a huge thing. I mean, we're really getting to this point of entitlement, driven by social media, by influencers, by like, look at this amazing thing where I am. You're entitled to have that experience too. And it's like, no, you're not. There's a lot of setup and there's a lot of fakery and tomfoolery going on behind the scenes to get that image. Your experience will be your own. And if you go in there with a high level of entitlement, with a lot of expectations, I'm going to Spain and I want to run with the bulls. It's like, you're probably going to be disappointed when you run with the bulls, because it's not going to be what you think it's going to be. Yeah. So, go there, just kind of, when you go traveling, drop the entitlement, drop the expectations. What will be, it will be your experience. Don't try and chase my experience or anybody else's, you watch something on TV, like, I want to do that. It's like, when you do it, it's going to be totally different. The people you're with are going to be totally different. The weather will be different. The food will be different. That's great. That's awesome. It's yours. You can own it. So that really is about packing, the right state of mind to have any successful journey.
Nice one. Cool. And what's the best way if people want to follow what you're up to and find out when the new book comes out? What's the best way to get in contact?
Well, I'll be putting everything out on my blog, robinesrock.com. Right now I run 4 blogs, I think. I've lost count. But robinesrock.com is where I live online. There's been lately quite a few posts about COVID. Just looking at everything and trying to make sense of it. But at the end of the day, I was given a very fortunate gift to be able to go to the places and see the things that most people don't get to and see. And as in this new world that we live in, it's a more beautiful gift than I could ever have imagined. I used to think one day the satellites are going to, there's going to be a solar flare and satellites are going to go down and that's it. We're going to go back to the Stone Age. And then it'll be like, tell us about that time you visited Kenya. because it's going to be so far-fetched, and the world had become so close, so accessible. And I really hope that we can keep that accessibility, and travel doesn't become this thing for the rich, for the extraordinarily rich, that airlines can recover, and yet be more sustainable when they do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be watching with great interest how this is all going to unfold. And in the meantime, get this book published, because I think people will love it, and then write another one.
Good stuff. Thanks, Robin. It's been great chatting to you, and we'll see what's happened with everything, and good luck with the book.
Right on, Oli. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Bye.